Are you telling yourself you can't start your YouTube channel until you get a decent camera or better lighting or a tripod that extends or editing software that you have to pay for? I want to offer that it might be more of a mindset problem rather than a technology issue. And this video will talk about that, how it could be the fear rather than the gear that's keeping you from hitting record. So, this is part of a mini series about not letting perfectionism stand in your way of starting a YouTube channel. My channel, Self Coaching for Skeptics, is far from perfect, but I got caught into all the traps I'm sharing in these videos, which is why I'm hoping that my sharing them with you might keep you from languishing too long behind one of these stall tactics. And really, the first one with the tech panic, it's kind of sneaky, right? Because you do have to have something to record, right? And I'll talk a little bit about what I use. But recognize it for what it might be. Sure, it's helpful to know a little bit about what the mechanics need to look at, but is it a way that you're trying to not hit record and not get on this side of the camera? Possibly, and in my case, maybe. I found myself doing lots of research rather than just getting on with using what I had. And so the tool the self-coaching tool, or the question you might want to ask yourself is kind of, what am I making the good equipment mean? Am I making it mean that people will take me seriously? Or am I making it mean like this will only seem important or expert if I have like this like super nice technology behind it? I'm not sure. For me, it was definitely a way to like keep from starting. So just consider that when you're thinking about technology's the issue. The second point I want to offer is just to start with what you have. I would hazard to guess that most of us have a smartphone that can record. I certainly have one and have had one for years. And when I was starting my YouTube channel, it just happened a time when it was time to upgrade my phone. So I made sure kept in mind like which one would be really good for recording videos. And I did do, a certain amount of research and look into what that might look like. But honestly, I used natural light, I used my iPhone, and I used my hand as my tripod. And I've since up leveled, but I really once I recognized that it was just keeping me from hitting record, I was able to be like, all right, I'm on to you, Aaron. Let's get going with this. And for me, you want to kind of emphasize that action over the aesthetics of what's happening. And remember, you can always upgrade later, but you can't get that time back. So if you spend even more weeks or days or hours researching the technology, it's that much time you haven't recorded. And what I have found, the beauty of YouTube is that the more you practice, the better you get, and then you figure out what you need. We'll talk about that in just a second. But you might coach yourself through this by asking, if I had to record a video today with what I had, what would that look like? Would it look like an outstretched arm? Or for me, I propped up my video on a stool with some yoga blocks before I got a tripod. And I did the first couple of videos like that. And there you go. I was still making some progress. And it felt better doing that than still hiding behind, I can't do this until I have the perfect camera. One other consideration is that the constraints of your technology could foster creativity. Now, this channel has a whole video about constraint, and you'll know if you've listened to any of my other tips, I use this a lot with myself because I know for me, putting some guardrails around a lot of my actions keeps me from over researching, deciding to get overwhelmed, spinning out. So for instance, I gave myself a couple hours today to film. And so this is when I'm going to do it. This is when I showed up. Did I feel like doing it? Not particularly. I'll be honest. It's quite hot today here in Colorado. And I'm like, man, I should have done this first thing in the morning, but here we are recording. And some of the most effective creators will just start simple. And honestly, I find that builds trust, right? You can see their technology evolve over time, and you can see those first videos. And there's something kind of endearing in realizing that your creators also started off somewhere. There's also just the part for me where I didn't want to go out, and invest a bunch of money into a bunch of things because I was letting that kind of take over my attention versus the creative process. So once you kind of like lean into your low tech setup, then you can get creative. So for me, that also meant like researching, what can this phone do? What can I do with the different setups? What can my editing software do? Again, I always like to remind you to constrain that, because you can get certainly lost in special effects and all the things that can sometimes just wind up being distracting. And again, keeping you from posting the video. But one of the things you might say is, what is the best creative decision I can do based on what I've got today with my current limitations? And that can kind of get your brain started on some solutions like, oh, I can maybe, make the space in my house like work well. And I'll mention it again just because it's come up in the perfectionism series, that I sort of got there by practicing every day for 30 days. I set myself a task to record an 8-minute video. And I will say it answered a lot of these questions for me. It helped me figure out, get used to how I looked on camera. It helped me figure out the kind of content I wanted to create, become kind of accustomed to what I sounded like on video, and also to kind of realize, okay, this is the gear I have. Let's start recording these videos. And then as I go along, I can figure out what's something that might make things like way easier. So, I did end up buying an extendable tripod. It's an inexpensive one, and I can provide links to those if you're interested, or at least a list of what I used. But that was something that I was like, oh, if I just have this one piece of equipment, then I don't have to drag in stools and yoga blocks and all the other things. And so it was worth it, the $35 that I spent. So the fourth point would be to up level gradually, but only if you want to. There's still a lot of great videos being made out there with somebody's arm extended and on their iPhone. And I think that's great. The upgrades that I have made, the small upgrades, like getting that tripod, or I was in the market for a watch, and having the same watch as my phone allowed me to start it from over here, saves a couple steps. That was also what I ended up doing when I realized I needed a personal computer, that I'm going to be traveling, and I want to be able to do this when I'm traveling. It allowed me to use the same system and ecosystem between all of the products, so that it was much easier to upload a video. Saving those steps really made a big difference for me, because I work full time. So I'm kind of sprinkling all these efforts in between a full time job and lots of other obligations. But I waited a few weeks and months really before I decided to do that. And also just because then I could say, hey, I seem to be committed to this, so I don't mind spending some money on this now. And I I invested in those things because, like, hey, I believe I'm going to keep up with this, not because I was thinking, oh, I'm not good enough without that. So keep mindful of that. I would also suggest, just on a more logistic way, that a lot of what you might not be able to capture in your video when you're recording can be made up in your editing software later. At least that's what I found, including mics, lighting, all those things. So keep that in mind when when you do have some time for research. So I will have a clip that I'll add here that'll show you my setup, and you will be, shocked and probably bored by how simple it is. So this is my setup. I'm gonna show it to you here really quick. It's very basic. I'm recording it actually with the same phone, but I use my iPhone 16. I use it on a cinematic setting. I have this light that turns on here. So you can see that provides a little bit of light there. I have a clip here. You can kind of see this, and it has a shoe on top that will then allow for the light or other pieces, and that clips on to basic tripod. It's an extendable tripod, so you can extend it up to, I usually do it about eye level. And then this piece that's here in the side of the iPhone, that's the microphone. I'm wearing it, but obviously I'm not recording with that phone. I have a double one here. It's just a wireless charger. They come in here, and then that piece comes into your phone. And then when I'm standing here, and again, this is a corner of a room that has a white wall, I'm relying on natural light from the two sides where these windows are. You can see it's a really small room here. This is also where I do my full-time job on this computer here. And so when I kind of moved to doing digital notes, whoops, excuse me, I put my monitor here and try to casually use my notes over to this side. Now, I sometimes don't rely on this completely, and I also sometimes write up my notes and use a piece of paper here. It doesn't bother me when I'm watching a video and people look at notes, so hopefully it doesn't distract people too much. And then I do my editing for the most part on this MacBook, which is a new purchase, which I'll talk about in my video. So that is my setup. Pretty lo-fi it is. But I do want to mention that, I experimented a little. And so you will have to do that for yourself as well and figure out what kind of works. But remember, we want to not wait for our setup to be perfect, to start with what we have. And the most powerful tool you'll ever need with this venture is to be able to manage your mind. The rest, you're going to figure it out. I did, and if I can do it, I have no doubt you can too. So thanks for joining. Be sure to check out the other series, and if this content's helping, be sure to subscribe. We'll see you next time.